morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. Welcome to my fourth session on my Docker track, which is Docker 104. Today, we're going to learn about how to Dockerize or containerize your website and publish it to a container registry. Let me just introduce myself real quick. My name is Wei. I am a coach here at Major League Hacking. I use he, him pronouns. And my fun fact is my bounty has been rescinded. I am a free man. If you're wondering what I mean by that, go ahead and check out Python Pros Guild. I'm super thankful. And this is the Peter. This is Peter. All right, let me just get rid of this banner real quick. And I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to check in. And let me go ahead and share the checking link. I would love for you to get your point so that you can go ahead and just click the checking link. I am also going to check in real quick. So please do it with me. And that way we know you attended the event. Cool. With that, let's keep going. All right, just to recap what we've done so far over the week, Cloud Week. First, we learned about the basics and we installed Docker on your cloud server. We learned about what Docker is, what Docker images are, and we also learned about Docker containers, differences between them. Hello there, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And we also learned about how to effortlessly deploy any app to your cloud server using Docker. Docker makes it so easy. We deployed a couple applications, including an uptime monitor, which I still have up. That's tracking our Global Hack Week website. And we have a blog that's also being deployed and running on my cloud server right now. And next, yesterday, we learned about how to securely access apps, or actually Friday we did this, how to securely access your apps using your custom domain through Cloudflare. We learned about how to create a Cloudflare tunnel and securely access these two domains. And they are actually up right now. And as you can see here, they both have the lock. And today, we're going to learn about how to Dockerize your website or your app, and we're going to publish it to a container registry. So if you have a portfolio website, or if you're thinking about creating one, can you let me know in chat, like what languages, what frameworks do you typically use? Have you seen any good templates out there, or did you create your own? I'd love to hear it. All right, thank you so much for being here. Welcome, welcome. So for myself, I created a web portfolio website using Node.js and Next.js. I'm a fan of JavaScript, TypeScript, so that's kind of the stack I'm working with. And we see we also have a simple portfolio site using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those typically are the best way to go if it's a simple site. They have the least overhead, so very good choice there. But let's keep going. Yeah, let me know in chat if you have any other languages of choice. Oh, we do have someone who's planning to use a portfolio, creating a portfolio with Streamlit. Okay, yeah, that's really nice. I know Streamlit has been a hit in the hackathons I've been to. They make building websites, especially using Python, so easy. Visualizations, and also has a ton of great features. So I highly recommend checking that out if you are a Python enthusiast and you haven't used it before. All right, too busy? Don't worry at all. We do have recordings available, and we also have our Global Hack Week Beginners Week next month if you would like to join in then. Cool. So what we're learning today is we're going to learn about the basics of Docker files, how to create a basic Docker file. We're going to learn about how to containerize an application, and we're going to learn about the basics of container registries and how that works to store your Docker images. And just to recap some of the things we did in session 1, some of the apps that we deployed in session 2, and some of the things we did in session 3 involving connecting Cloudflare Tunnel and making your website accessible through HTTPS, making it super easy. And lastly, today, this is our session plan here. First, we will talk briefly about Docker files, what they are, what they do. We're going to talk about container registries, and we're going to create a basic Docker file for your app and website. I'm going to take an open source project as an example shortly here. But if you have a project or an app, it doesn't have to be your portfolio website. If you have an app that you would like to containerize, feel free to drop them in chat afterwards, and we can do it live. But to start, let's talk about Docker files. What are Docker files? Docker files are definitions of a Docker image. So here is an example Docker file using Go. And some of the typical commands here are you first start from a base image. In this case, we're starting from a Docker Golang base image. You're defining the working directory and copying some of your source code into the Docker image. And during the build process, you're downloading some dependencies, you're building, and then lastly, you're defining like what is the entry point of your application. So in this case, it is the server binary that's built using Go. But if it's a Next.js app, maybe it could be npm start or something like that. And there are some, here's a description of what it's doing. I'm going to send the link in chat if you would like to check it out. More detailed descriptions of what each command does. But once you have a Docker file, how do you convert it into a Docker image? And the way you do that is by using the command docker build. And you can specify an optional tag to make it a little bit easier for you to access the Docker image later on. But this is basically the command to build a Docker image from a Docker file. And lastly, you can run the containers, spin up containers using the Docker images by just using docker run. And this is actually the name, the tag that you specified in docker build. And you can specify various flags during docker run to name the container, to run it in detached mode and things like that. So there are tons of arguments you can supply to this as well. So that is the gist of Dockerfile. Please let me know if you have any questions or if you want to dive into any of the topics above. But I think everything will make a little bit more sense once we go through an example. And the next topic I want to just chat real quick about is the container registry. The traditional container registry, the official container registry, I would say, is Docker Hub, which we showed in session 101. And this is where all the official images are stored. So things like Node.js, for example. I think it's just called Node, actually. You'll see an official Docker image there. You have MongoDB, you have Redis, you have all kinds of other official images on Docker Hub. But you can also have your own container registry, and there are third-party container registries that you can use very easily, just as easy as Docker Hub. One such container registry is GitHub Container Registry. GitHub actually came out with this feature in 2020, and they make deploying or saving container images so easy because you can just use it together with your GitHub repository if you haven't seen this. Alright, thank you so much for stopping by. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited for this as well. Alright, so GitHub Container Registry. If you haven't seen GitHub packages, let me just open a example repo on my other screen here. Here is one repository that I created a while back at a different Global Hack Week, but here is my my README. If you notice, there is a link next to your README called packages, and that's actually where you can publish all kinds of packages that relates to your repo. Makes things so much easier for everything to be in the same place, right? The alternative, if you would like to make your image available on Docker Hub, you can also sign up for Docker Hub and push your images directly there. But just for simplicity, I love the GitHub Container Registry feature under GitHub Packages, and yeah, just makes everything organized, everything so neatly. And with that, let's talk about what Container Registry is. This is basically a repository of all your Docker images that you can deploy, you can push. So think of it as a online hard drive where you can store images, and then you can pull down images as needed. All right. So if you would like to read more about GitHub Container Registry, I am sharing the link in chat as well. They have integration with GitHub Actions, as you can see in the document here, to make it so easy to push out your Docker image. And we will do that in an example shortly here. So if you are just joining us, and I would love for you to share your portfolio or your app that you would like to containerize, and we can do that at the end of the session. But for now, I found a very neat portfolio website template using Next.js, and this is going to be the one that we are going to work with to create a Docker image first. We'll create a Docker file and a Docker image. And I have attached that link in the chat as well. So this is a very cool project, and it's really nice. This is for a personal portfolio website, and let's just take a look at the demo URL, and this is what it looks like, right? I think it's really nice. It looks really good. It has multiple routes using Next.js routing. It has portfolio projects, experience, blog, and more. So it makes things so easy to have everything organized using Next.js. And the first thing I'm going to do, let me just open that repo one more time. Okay, here is the repo. I am going to fork this, and I will name it, what's a good name for it? My portfolio. Okay, that is going to be, I'll just call it portfolio. Why don't I just call it portfolio? So the repo is going to be called worker/portfolio, and I'm going to create a fork of it. We'll just wait a few seconds here for GitHub to fork this repo. And now I have my own repo called worker/portfolio. All right, everything's working pretty well. And one thing I'm going to look through is how to set up and deploy this application, right? So as I can see here, first I need to fork and then run npm install, make modifications, store your image assets, and add your secret keys and deployment. Okay. Of course, you can deploy it on Vercel, Next.js app directly, but for today, we are going to create a Docker image using it. Let me just go through the variables and things like that here. It doesn't really matter. All right, cool. So I am going to the GitHub code space now, so I can edit this file, this repo in the cloud. So I'm going to go to code spaces under code and create a code space on the main branch. It will take a few seconds here. This is light mode. I know some of you dislikes the light mode, so maybe I'll pick a different theme. Let's see. Well, let's wait for the project to load for a little bit. And in the meantime, let's click on this link, number 2, create a Docker file for your app or website. So this goes to a official Docker doc, And this document has information on how to containerize an application, and we will go through it together. So let's look through prerequisites real quick. You have installed the latest version of Docker Desktop. You can do this on your computer, of course. So make sure you have the latest version of Docker Desktop available, but I am going to do it in a GitHub code space, which is a Ubuntu-based system. I have Git and I have IDE, which is the VS Code. So I have all the prerequisites. Let's just go back to our GitHub code space and change the theme here. I haven't used some of these themes. Let's try Solarize Dark. That's not the best theme for demo, so let me just go through a few and see which one works the best. Dark Modern. We'll do Dark Modern for now. All right. Cool. So let's go back to the documentation and take a look at the next steps. Before you run application, you get the source code onto your machine. So we've already done that because we created a code space from our repo, and that means all the source code has already been loaded onto the code space, and we have cloned and forked our repo. That's all done by the code space itself, so we don't have to worry about it. And in the example here, they are using Mac or Windows, right? Or they do have a Linux. So why don't we create a Docker file? So step 2 is to create a Docker file with this syntax, and let's just copy it real quick and create a new file in our project directory, and it's going to be called a Docker file. And I just pasted it. One thing to keep in mind is we need to make sure everything here matches up with our application, right? So if we look at the documentation of our application, it tells you what you need to do, right? You need to first do npm install, and we need to do, likely need to do a npm start to start the node server, right? So why don't we try that real quick? Let's do npm install, and we're going to do an npm start as the default command for running the Docker image. All right, cool. We also need to add some secrets, so we won't do that right now. Let's just try this out and see if it works. And if you remember from our intro page, let me see if I can find here. If you remember here, the command to build the image is docker build --tag build me, right? So let's try that real quick to build the container image. Allow paste, and I will name it portfolio. And it's going to go through with the build, and as you can see here, it's first doing step 1, and it's polling node 18-alpine, which is our line 3 here, and then it's going to proceed to step 2. So we'll wait a little bit. It looks like it does take a little bit of time to initially pull the image. Actually, we're likely on step 6 already, npm install, because it's taking a little bit more time. I'm suspecting. I could be wrong. We'll see. Okay, I think I realized the problem. So as you can see here, copy took a long time, and setting the work directory took a long time. And the reason is node modules was also copied over into the Docker image. We don't really need it because we're going to do npm install when building the image. And the way to solve that is to add a docker ignore file. And Docker ignore file works very similar to git ignore. So we're just going to copy git ignore for now and put it in Docker ignore. This will make sure like Docker just ignores those files when they're not needed. They are not really needed to build the Docker image. And I just closed my code space by accident and reloading it. What is the command to build the image? The command I just ran was, let me just clear it, docker build tag equal portfolio. You can pick any tag name you want. And then the key thing here is you need to add a dot at the end, which means current directory, because you could be building a Docker image from a different directory, which you can specify here. But dot just means the current directory. All right, thank you for posting that command. And for now, we are going to use this Docker ignore file. Basically ignores node modules and VS Code, those folders that are really not needed for the Docker image. And let's do it one more time and see if it works. By the way, quick tip here, if the terminal is getting a little bit too small for you, you can actually drag it up top. Okay, maybe you can't. I think on desktop, you can actually drag it and make it a tab. Oops. Okay, there it is. Okay, so as you can see here, the copy was done very quickly, and now it's running npm install. So we'll wait a little bit of time. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Okay, cool. And as you can see here, all the Docker steps, image build steps are complete. And now if we do if you run the command docker image, I think ls, you will see all the images that you have locally. And right now I have my portfolio, and it's built 33 seconds ago. Okay. And that's all looking good. Next, I am going to run the container. So this is also coming from the first documentation page I shared. All you have to do is use the command docker run. And you can run it in detached mode, but I don't really need to run in detached mode, so let me just run it regularly. And the command I'm going to use is, I'm going to call it my portfolio, or portfolio container. And then I'm going to do a -- remove, which means like if I quit the application using Control-C, Docker will automatically stop and remove the container, just to make it a little bit easier for us to work during development. And here is what I need to do here, just to specify the Docker image name. So this is the command I am going to run. Okay, perfect. We do have an error here, and as you can see, no such file or directory, because we did not build our application in Docker file. That is a very common mistake. So if we look at the example here, when working with a Go image, you first need to copy the source code, download dependencies, which is equivalent to npm install, and it has to build the application, and we skipped that. So let's add that back here. So npm run build, and this is actually the command defined in package.json. There's a build script, so because of that we can run npm run build to build the application. So why don't we run our build one more time with the same tag. If you use the same tag you know, the image will just be pointing, the tag will be pointing to the new image once built, making it very easy to manage. You can't drag up your terminal on VS Code. I thought they added that feature at one point in time. Maybe I was mistaken. So I'll have to check it out after the session. Thanks for letting me know. All right, cool. So as you can see here, we have a npm run install, and then now we're doing npm run build. This will take a little bit of time as our Next.js application is being built. Okay. All right, cool. So npm run build just completed, and now we are going to, it's going through the last steps of wrapping up the image. Are we on different docs? So we have two docs that we're working with right now. The first one, okay, yeah, we can just stick with this one. The last one I shared. Let me just say it one more time. Okay. So building the image. All right. By the way, you can use -t space the tag name in place of dash tags equals. They're the same thing. All right. Looks like the image build has been successful, so let's just double check here. And as you can see, we do have a portfolio Docker image available. It was built, created a minute ago, so that's perfect. And as you can see here, we still have the previous Docker image in our local repository because Docker does not automatically remove previous images. The only thing it does is it kind of reassigns the tag. So the portfolio tag is now pointing to the latest one, and the old one no longer has any tag associated with it. So you can remove it if you want using Docker image rm with the image ID, or I think there's a Docker system prune or something command that you can also use. So definitely check those out. So let's run our image one more time and see if it works. All right, beautiful. And as you can see here, we now just created a container using our portfolio Docker image, and this is the log of that new container, and it says the server is now listening to our localhost 3000, which is amazing. And we can actually confirm that by doing a Docker PS, and we can see here our portfolio is indeed running from 28 seconds ago, and it's listening on port 3000. All right, cool. So one thing to keep in mind is like you won't be able to access that port 3000 because it's only listening to port 3000 within the container itself. The host, container host, meaning your computer or your cloud server, can access it. In order for you to access it that way, you'll have to create a port mapping. And the way you create a port mapping is very easy. And let me first X out of this container. I can't seem to exit with Control-C, so let me actually grab my container name, which is portfolio container, and do a Docker stop. and this should stop the Docker container. Why do we need to build the app instead of just running npm start? This is because it depends on the application. For Next.js specifically, there is a build step that is required, especially when deploying in production. There are other like scripts like PHP or Python. A lot of the Python do not require builds, so it just depends on the framework you're using. Okay, so we have a tip here. We have a message here saying using the port. Yep, so this is what we're going to do. Let's just take a look at the documentation and make sure that's what it says. Yep. Okay, that's exactly what we need to do here. Okay, that's exactly what we need to do to expose the port. So you have docker run dp, but I would just recommend adding a couple lines. So name equals to docker container. This way, like, it's easier for you to work with this docker container instead of using the ID always, right? And then another thing I would like to use is I need to put is the docker tag, which is a docker image name that we created called portfolio. Just look through the documentation one more time, and that sounds good. So let me just go ahead and run that. And as you can see here, this command output looks a little bit different. This is because we are running in detached mode. So if you go through the documentation, you'll read that -d means detached. Detached just means like you now have it's going to run in the background, and you now have control over your terminal, and you can run other commands. If you would like to see logs, you can always do docker logs with your docker container name. And this is going to show you the logs. And as you can see here, it is listening on port 3000, and we should be able to just go to it and access my portfolio. Just like that. All right, can you please copy paste the command? Yes, of course. So this is the command I am using. So the only thing I added from the documentation is the name. This makes it just easier for us to refer to the Docker container later on. If you did not specify a name, you can always do a Docker PS, and you can use the container ID directly to execute any commands like checking logs or stop, remove, and things like that. Hope that helps. So I don't know if you noticed what we just did. We created a Docker file. We built a Docker image ls called portfolio, and we just ran a Docker container using that image, and we have a working portfolio site up live. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Very good progress we've made so far. So that is our number 3, build a Docker image using Dockerfile we just accomplished. The only other step after that is not the only. The next step after that is we want to push our Docker image onto our GitHub Container Registry to our GitHub packages. And as you can see here on the right, we have packages. I would love for my Docker image to show up there, right? The command to run the container is the one I shared, but the command to build the container is a little bit different. So let me just share that one more time. Where's my VS Code? This is the command to build the container. And once we build the container, we're able to run using the docker run command. Does that help? Okay, perfect. Thanks for your question. All right, I am going to push these 2 files real quick to my GitHub repo, so if you would like to refer to them, you can. Add Docker file. And I'm going to push. And this is my repo if you would like to refer to it. Okay. So yeah, so the next step is to push our Docker image that we created to a package manager like GitHub Container Registry, right? GitHub packages. And the way to do that is using GitHub Actions. It makes it so easy, publishing images to GitHub packages. And here is a resource link I would like to share with you. And here is an example GitHub action. I can just copy paste. So I'm going to copy this, and I am going to go to my code here. Actually, I can probably just do it here. So on the right here, we have suggested workflows. Okay, yeah, so if you go under your Actions tab, you can search for Docker image. Okay, Docker image. And let's create a workflow. Say build and push Docker image. And in the example here, we're just going to copy the example from the documentation just to make it easy, since it has everything we need already. And I just hit copy. Now let me paste it. I know there's a lot of comments here, but you don't have to go, you can remove the comments if you don't need them. But I'm going to edit as I go through this workflow, and you can always go to my repo to check the latest once I commit and push. So I'm going to use master branch or main branch. Did I call it master or main? Let's just double check there. Okay, so this is the main branch of the repo. Anytime we push to the main branch, we are going to build and push the image. And here are two environment variables for the workflow. We don't really need to change them because these are just the defaults for GitHub Container Registry. And then the image name is just going to be my GitHub repo name. And as you can see here, we have Ubuntu latest. It's going to run on, which is the same as our GitHub code space. We have some permission setups here. And next, these are the steps that the GitHub Actions will take when building and pushing the container Docker image. First, we're going to check out the repository. We're going to log in to our container registry. And this is all done automatically by GitHub because GitHub Actions is run on your repository, Git repo. And Git repo has some built-in secrets like the username and the password of the Git repo, and we're giving GitHub Actions permissions here to write to packages. So with these credentials, GitHub Actions will have access to GitHub Container Registry. Let me just add some blank lines here. It looks a little bit crammed. Okay, so this is to log in. And the step after login is extract metadata for Docker. So this is extract tags and labels for Docker. And this is using build push action. Okay. So you can read through the documentation here, but basically Docker is going, GitHub Actions is automatically going to build your Docker image and push it out to our container registry. And why don't I just commit this, create this, and let it run and see if it works. I'm going to check out my actions here under the Actions tab, and you can see the new action I created called Create and Publish a Docker Image. And within that, we have one workflow that is running. And these are all the steps we listed in the GitHub workflow file, GitHub Actions workflow file. And it's now building and pushing the Docker image. This is going to take a little bit of time, just like how it took a little bit of time when we were doing it ourselves in our GitHub workspace. But we'll just wait a little bit and see if it builds. And if you want the file for the actions file I created, you can check out this commit message and the commit contents and do it the same way if you'd like. Okay, perfect. Looks like the application has built. Next.js build is successful. It rendered all these pages already. And it's pushing to our GitHub Container Registry, looks like. It's pushing all the layers of the application of the Docker image. So this workflow will be triggered anytime I make a push to the GitHub repo, just to make it super, super easy and seamless. Oh, thank you so much. I got it at HackCon. Good. It's getting a little bit hot here, so I'm going to take off my Emily's jacket. Taking a lot of time to build. Is it a big project? Yeah, I believe it's a fairly sized project. It did take a little bit longer to build. I haven't looked into all the details of the project yet, but it looks like it just went through successfully. So you see the green check mark. I'm gonna just scroll all the way up and you'll see it is complete. So what we can do now is go back to our homepage of our repo, and on the right there, you should now see packages. And we now have a portfolio package that is linked to our repository. Now, anytime I update anything on the repo, like if I change anything on my portfolio site, maybe if I change the picture, if I change the name, everything will be updated automatically. It's going to build and push a new Docker image out to the the GitHub Container Registry, and I can use my image anywhere, including my cloud server. That is the key thing we're going to do next, which is using this GitHub Container Registry image that we pushed on our cloud server so that we can run the portfolio site without worrying about anything. We just need to run 2 commands to get it running. But before then, let me make this image public. Let me see if I can make it public. It is already public, so I don't have to do anything. Perfect. Okay. Do many people use Docker Hub? A lot of people use Docker Hub. So Docker Hub is the most popular container registry out there, and it's hosted by Docker, the company who created Docker itself. Yeah, so if you would like to publish your container image to other people or to share with other people, Docker Hub is probably the best place to be. But I also very like the fact that GitHub Packages has the capability of publishing any type of packages, like you can even publish npm packages or other types of packages directly on GitHub. This makes it so easy to manage, like when you're working with open source projects, you can just have the container image right next to your repo. And it's also especially useful when you're working on private projects, because then you can just access those container images privately and they're all linked to your repo. So that's my 2 cents. Are we going to use Docker Hub or any other registry? We are not using Docker Hub for this session, but the documentation page I linked you has information on how to publish your container image to Docker Hub as well. It's actually the heading right under the one I shared, so you can check it out if you'd like. The gist is you basically need to store your Docker Hub or other container registry credentials in your GitHub secrets, and then you should be able to log in and publish very easily. So just check out this sample action here that publishes to both GitHub Container Registry and Docker Hub. Hope that helps. All right, we have another message here. I did publish a few images. Sizes are too big. Okay, that is actually a very good point. So I do have a resource link I was going to share later. Let me see if I can find it. It includes like the best practices of here it is. Best practices for containerizing, especially Node.js applications with Docker. So there are a couple things you can do. So first, choose a, this is a normal Node.js Docker image from Node, but I would recommend choosing a slim, like a more slim base image. And then another thing I would do is, like, once everything is built, there's a way to use like a distroless, this is called a Google distroless image, that you only copy the files you absolutely need to run your Node.js application instead of any overhead. So highly recommend checking that out. Let me just go ahead and share this link for best practices to containerize Node.js web application. This is actually a recommended link on the Docker documentation as well. So hope that helps. But I'm happy to chat about it after, because I am very passionate about Docker. Okay. So I think we just, yeah, thank you so much for your question. Keep them coming. So we just completed number 4, which is we published our Docker image to our GitHub packages container registry. And we can see that right here. And we even have a little URL here that we can use. This is basically our container name that we can use. So this is perfect. And let's move forward to number 5. This is to deploy a Docker container using the new image. We can do this on our own computers, of course, but I am going to do it on my cloud server. So let me go to DigitalOcean. This is the server we have been using for the last 3 sessions, and go ahead and log in to the server using SSH. And if we look at Docker PS real quick, you can see I already have a ton of applications running, and we're just going to add to the list. Does anybody remember the command to run a Docker image? Specifically our portfolio image. Does anybody remember that? Let me just scroll back through chat and see if I can find it. But if anybody has it handy, please let me know in chat. Okay, I think I found it, which is right here. Right here, yes, perfect. Thank you for sharing that. We're basically gonna do the same thing. First of all, I do have something running on port 3000 already, so why don't I stop those first, and then we have cut running there. So I think I have a cut application that I can just stop real quick since it's taking up the port 3000. And I can do this real quick using Docker Compose down. We'll get into it in a little bit. We'll talk about Docker Compose in a little bit. And as you can see, the cut applications are now gone from my list, and nothing else is listening on port 3000. This is actually a very, very common error that people make. That is port collisions. If you have things already running on a port, you need to make sure other applications are not running on the same port. We're going to make two modifications to this Docker run command. First, we're going to change 127.0.0.1 to 0.0.0.0. We can even omit that, I think, by just specifying 3000, 3000. Okay. The reason we're doing it is because 127.0.0.1 means only the local, the local computer can access it. So if you are running it on your home computer, only your home computer itself can access the container at port 3000. If you're using a cloud server and you specify 127.0.0.1, only other applications within the cloud server can access your container at port 3000. But if I don't include it, or if I include 0.0.0.0, this means like anybody can access it. So you, me, anybody in the world can now access my application on port 3000. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. And the next thing we're going to do is to set up a name, just like we did in the example here. Oh, I just realized you can't see my command, so let me move my window up just a tad. Okay, that's better. So Docker run -dp, just use 3000 so that anybody in the world can access our website. --name, portfolio. I'm just going to call it portfolio container. Okay. And then here is the second change we're going to make. Instead of portfolio, we're going to use the full name of our container image on Docker Container Registry. And the full name is listed here. ghcr.io/worker/portfolio:main. The reason we need to use the full name is we need to tell Docker where our image is, right? Since our image is on GitHub Container Registry, we need to use the full path here. And that's it. I'm going to copy this command in chat. You can run the same if you'd like, or you can run using your Docker GitHub Container Registry image name. All right, so this is what I'm running right now, and I'm gonna hit go. As you can see here, we are now pulling our image from Docker Container Registry. I haven't done anything on my cloud server, so I've never cloned my portfolio repo. I have never installed any dependency. The only command I'm running is this Docker run command with my image name, right? This just shows you how easy it is to spin up an application, or once you containerize an application, the users of the application who needs to run the application, they don't need to know anything. They just need to run a single command. And as you can see here, we now have our portfolio container running on our cloud server at port 3000. Let's just verify it is indeed running at port 3000 by going to our IP address, HTTP 3000. And oh, I do have a redirection going on from before, so let me see if I can just clear cache. 3000. Okay, there you go. So if you go to this IP address, port 3000, you should now be able to access my portfolio site. All right, let me know if you can see my portfolio site. Of course, I'm going to be updating some of the info to match up with my name. So why don't we do that real quick? I want to change my picture as well. So let's go to images. Oh, there are a lot of images here. I don't know which one's which. So let's go to our application, take a quick look at this image URL. Looks like it's AR profile transformed.png. AR profile transformed.png under images. So I am going to change that. So let's go to public images, and I'm going to upload my profile image there. Well, I have my Peter the Pizza image, so why don't I change it to that instead? I'm going to upload the image and then replace this file. Now it's a pizza, and I'm going to change the name. To Peter's the Pizzas. Okay, and I'm going to push update profile image and name. What I'm really trying to test is if my Docker container image will be built successfully using GitHub Actions automatically, and if it will be pushed to our GitHub package manager, which is the GitHub Container Registry automatically. So first I want to just double check the version of the image that I currently have. And as you can see here, this is published 15 minutes ago, and here's the digest for that image. And we're going to wait for GitHub Actions to rebuild and repush our image to the GitHub Container Registry. In the meantime, if you have any questions, let me know. Just close out some of the tabs that we no longer need. Actually, there's something we can do in the meantime. If you remember the last session, we set up a tunnel already, and we created 2 domains, right? So we created uptime.wayonstream.co and blog.wayonstream.co. Why don't we create a portfolio.wayonstream.co that points to our website? So let's do that. It's super, super easy. All I have to do is say portfolio, I spelled it wrong, portfolio.wayonstream.co, and this is going to our port 3000. Just like that, let's save hostname. And you can see now we now have a portfolio.wayonstream.co available here, and we can go to it with just literally like 5 clicks, not even. We have created a secure HTTPS tunnel that is serving our website now at https portfolio.wayonstream.co. And let's just check back at our build process. Looks like it is finished. And if we go to our GitHub package manager and refresh, we'll see a new tag, a new image has been published less than a minute ago. That's perfect. All right, cool. All right, so The only other, the next step is we want to refresh the container that is currently running on our cloud server, right? Because this is using the old Docker image. We need to grab the new Docker image. And there are a couple ways to do it. Let me just double check here and see what is the best way for us. Okay. All right, so the easiest way for us to do it is we should first stop and remove this image, and then we should pull the latest using the docker pull command that's shown here, and then we can start a new container with the new image. And we can do that with 3 commands really. Docker stop portfolio container. Once we stop the container, it will no longer be accessible. Might take a couple seconds. If we go back to our website here, portfolio.wayonstream.co, it no longer works, right? Because we stopped the container. Next, we need to remove the container. And the last step is we just pull. Actually, 2 more steps. We need to pull using the command from the Docker Container Registry, GitHub Container Registry. Keep mixing them up. You can see it is now pulling the latest. Does take a little bit of time, so we'll just wait. And let me actually make a note of the commands we're running because it will be useful for our next session. All right, looks like it is downloaded, and the only other step is to just run our container image again. And with that, if we go back to our portfolio website, you should see Peter's the Pizzas on the page with the picture here. So just like that, we made an update on our GitHub repo. GitHub Actions automatically captured those changes, built a new Docker image, and published it to the GitHub Container Registry. And lastly, we did what we did on our cloud server. The steps are: we stopped and removed the portfolio container container. We pulled the latest image, and we created a new container from that image using the latest image from GitHub Container Registry. So that's kind of what we did. Very easy, very straightforward. Let me know what you think. We actually just completed step 6 as well. We connected our custom domain to our website using Cloudflare tunnels so that our website is now accessible on portfolio.wayonstream.co. How does that sound, everybody? What do you think? Are you ready to build your own Docker files and Docker images? Did you find it helpful? While we wait for questions or any comments, let's just get into Docker Compose real quick. I'm only going to cover it very briefly since this is a little bit more complex than others. I really appreciate your message. Thank you so much for being here and following along. Even if you are not following it step by step, you're still kind of exploring the different fields, how CI/CD works using GitHub Actions, how Docker packages work, how Cloudflare tunnels can help you route your sites and secure your sites using HTTPS and domains. So this is kind of a session that brings everything together, right? Cool. So Docker Compose is another step above Dockerfile. Docker Compose is used to define multiple containers that you need to run in a service. An example of that is actually our cut service that we stopped earlier. So if we go to cut and print out the Docker Compose file that they have, you'll notice that inside the Compose file, version 3, they have 3 services running. They have the main cut service, which is the web application for the URL shortener, and it actually depends on 2 other containers. This is the separation of concerns. We have a Postgres database container that's sole responsibility is to manage the database. And we have a Redis container that's sole responsibility is to manage caching. And cut is a web application that uses that database, Postgres database, and it uses Redis caching. By defining it in a Docker Compose file, you're essentially bringing together all the moving parts of the application, all the dependencies, into a single file. With this, like anybody running the cut application, traditionally they'll have to install Redis, configure the username password, install PostgreSQL, PostgreSQL, set up the username password, maybe initialize the database and all that, and then provide the credentials in a environment variable or something, or another format to the cut web service for it to connect to. So just listening to that, it takes hours to do, right? With Docker, everything can be done in just one command, Docker Compose up, because all the definitions of your application architecture is defined within the Docker Compose file. And yeah, it's as simple as that. This is also super useful for development purposes as well, because you can run Docker locally on your computer the same way it's running in production. So it makes developing also super easy. So that is kind of the reason and the gist behind Docker Compose. I'm sure like a lot of your applications will require a database or caching or another dependency of some sort that is not really the concern of your application, right? So by doing it this way, you're separating the concerns, and you just use the images or official images released by the Redis developers and the PostgreSQL developers, and you only need to worry about your own Docker file and your own Docker image. So that's quite a rant on Docker Compose and the advantages of it. I highly recommend checking out all the other key features and the reasonings behind Docker Compose. And here is the resource link for that. This is a very good point I forgot to mention, is if the database PostgreSQL has a bug and somebody is able to remote into that database server, if it's installed on the same server as your application, then your whole system is compromised, right? But if it's within a Docker container, then the permissions and the environment is isolated from all the other containers, and you won't be able to have direct access to your system or the other containers automatically. So yeah, check out some of these common use cases as well, and let me know what you think. We'll give everybody a few more seconds to catch up and leave any questions or comments in the chat. But let's go to the next slide. Oh, this is a Q&A, so if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Key takeaways for this session. All right, we learned about Dockerfile. We learned about how to create Docker images and push to a container registry like Docker Hub or GitHub Package Manager. we learned about, let's see what else we learned about. Here it is. How to build a Docker image on GitHub Actions using the built-in CI/CD pipeline. We made an update to our website and we saw GitHub Actions in action, right? And actually went ahead and built a new Docker image with our changes. And we also connected our custom domain. We ran our Docker image, ran a container using the Docker image that we created on our cloud server. And we connected our custom domain to it using Cloudflare tunnels, which was covered in the last session. We just did it in like 5 clicks or so, made it super simple to secure our web applications. And lastly, we learned a little bit about Docker Compose and the advantages of it. So if you are working on a more complex application, I highly recommend checking out Docker Compose and supplying a Docker Compose file inside your application. This will make development so much easier, and it will also make production deployment super easy as well. With that, we have one last session tonight. That is our Docker 105 CI/CD and automatic Docker deployments. So during that session, we will learn a little bit about CI/CD. I know we mentioned it a little bit here with GitHub Actions, but we'll go into a little bit more detail about CI/CD, and we will learn about how to automatically deploy Docker containers. So if you make a change on your GitHub, like I did, how do we automatically deploy the changes that we've made to our cloud server without manual intervention, without having to type out all the commands that we had to type out? So stay tuned for that. This is happening tonight at 7 p.m. I believe Eastern. Be sure to check the calendar, and let me actually share the RSVP link as well if you are interested to learn more. With that, here are some of the resources. I have shared this link earlier, but I'll just share it one more time. Be sure to check out some of the best practices, how to publish your Docker images to Container Registry, and some awesome Docker Compose file templates. And this is very useful depending on your application architecture, like Flask, if you're using Redis, if you're using Nginx. It has so many examples of Docker Compose files that you can start from. And yeah, definitely check those out. Very useful. With that, I just want to thank everybody so much for coming to my Docker track and Docker 104 session. I hope you learned a lot. Coming up, we do have our Today in Global Hack Week. Be sure to stay tuned for that. That will be our day 7. I hope you have a wonderful time and a wonderful day. See you tonight. Bye for now.